So let's start with this question of ignorance and knowledge, because part of the difficulty comes once we look at ignorance and knowledge just a state, like I either know it or I'm ignorant. And that causes the issue as to whether, well, if knowledge is recollection, do I have it? When do I have it? Can I have it in life? Can I have it as a philosopher if I practice of death? And all this becomes kind of categorical question. So I would suggest this by way of starting to answer the question: what does it mean to practice ignorance? Because part of the difficulty, and I'm especially convinced of this with Euthyphro, at least we need to think about this. Euthyphro's doing injustice comes from his positive desire to do justice, and his claim that he knows what justice is, thereby exercises power over his father. Now, regardless of what you think about whether he is right or wrong, the question here is the presumption that he knows what justice is. And the claim is, you probably heard this, you are in college, in a reasonably woke college, I suppose. Knowledge is power. We always say that, knowledge is power, whatever the hell that means. Like, depending on who you read, it will mean different, but anyway. So that kind of exercise of power is why we seek knowledge. We seek knowledge for the sake of power. That power might be, for us, a positive power, empowering ourselves because we are disempowered, or it might be just to have a power over nature, power over each other, power of recognition. Like, with my knowledge, I'm going to prove how wonderful I am to other people. That will give me further power, etc. So Socrates' question about the ignorance is that, can we exercise this? In other words, I'm not going to judge you means I'm not going to say it to you. As I said 2 minutes ago, like, I'm not going to say it to you, but I'll still judge you. Like, me not being judgmental really means, like, I think your life is wrong and you are living in a wrong way, or you are doing things wrong, but I'm not going to say it to you because I cannot tolerate the social consequences of calling somebody out. That's not judgmental. But can as a philosopher, practice this ignorance for yourself? Is it really possible that I don't really know it? Is it possible that I will suspend my judgment, not my expression of my judgment, by the judgment itself? Namely, I don't know. I don't know whether this is good or bad, or I don't know what good is. That's the moment of practicing of ignorance. And, he makes that into something like recollection of some previous state of the soul, etc., because he wants to say that he always is going to remain as a philosopher. The love of wisdom is never give him wisdom. You will never have what you love. That's why you love it. If you think that you have it, then you will not love it, which incidentally turns out to be a very good metaphor for love relationships too, like person to person. When you have that person, you don't love them anymore. That happens. So that's the practice of ignorance, practice of not having it, not just being in that stage or not. So to answer part of your question, maybe for him, he makes that into an issue of recollection. And when you say absolute, which is really a very difficult concept, because absolute is being absolved from conditions. Since as long as I live, I'm always conditioned, of course, I will never have total absolution from each condition. So my knowledge of the justice is always going to be non-absolute, because I live in the 21st century in a context. My judgment of the situation is limited. Now, obviously, we all think that our understanding of judgment is far superior, with a little bit of sarcasm, to the past, right? I mean, those people, they were terrible. But I am far superior in my judgment of myself, justice. We are so much better off than the past. I mean, everybody think. I mean, not of course, not everybody thinks that. Ironically, people who are in power think that, but still. So we think that. So then it will never be absolute. So even yes, I might have this notion of justice, but can I still continue to question it? Practice that ignorance, despite half of me thinks that I already got it. Can I practice that? And what kind of life does that bring about? To me, we really suffer from people who think that they know what justice is and impose it upon other people. And that's regardless of your political affiliation or your religious affiliation, or whether you are secular, or whether you are a scientist, whether you are a urban, rural, whatever you are. We always like use that power. So philosophy is that practice of that ignorance, and you cannot really explain it in any other way. Not just being ignorant, but practicing ignorance. Not feigning ignorance, not pretending to be ignorant, but genuinely thinking to yourself, yes, I mean, I have a conception of justice. I explained to Charlie like how I try to make students come to class and attendance, etc. Is that even like I don't even know whether that's, I mean, I'll say it, it sounds good, I practice it, etc. But is that justice itself? Am I really capturing? No, this is a limited human existence in which we are grasping without being sure of that is actually justice. Yes.
So there's a sort of negative, not like bad, but like a negative process here of like we're trying to practice ignorance in order to sort of free ourselves of conditioned like pseudo knowledge. Like that's how I interpret it.
Say it again. I'm a little bit pseudo knowledge.
Or like things that like we're conditioned to think are like correct or like definitely true. Like I know what justice is because like I studied it in this class or something. But then I feel like there's also this positive effect of like then by practicing the ignorance, the idea is that then that can be replaced with some knowledge that you reach through sort of internal reasoning and like investigation of
Yeah,
your soul and trying to remember and things. And like every time that you reach some sort of decision point in your life, I feel like what Socrates is saying is like you need to like again like practice ignorance, forget what you think you know, and like do this investigation again like every single time.
Yeah, no, that's a good observation. Yes, I think I agree with that.
So
yeah,
given that, if then the soul is separated from the body in death, and the body is what imposes this like conditioned knowledge, then is the idea that in death the soul is kind of like bathing in a world of already being at like the correct like internally reasoned knowledge, like there no longer has to be a practice of like forgetting the sort of body knowledge, societal knowledge, conditioned knowledge, because it's just your soul and all the like knowledge that of like true forms and true concepts is like already there.
Well, of course I don't know. I guess I might ask you like, are you after death thinking of the soul still as an individualized soul, as my soul, whatever my refers to there? Like, because do I own my soul? Who am I? Who owns what in terms of my soul as a person? So if you imagining like a soul which has two little eyes, your eyes, and looking at other souls after death, etc., that's still sort of thinking of soul in terms of possession. And I think that's really what later on, Socrates, under certain schools, interpreted like that's possession. That's like, I have the soul. It's my soul. I possess the soul. Like after death, you don't possess the soul. So it's very difficult to think about an individualized soul among other souls. Yeah.
But I guess I thought that the individualized soul is exactly what Socrates was sort of arguing for in Phaedo. I mean, Socrates through Phaedo, through the guy that Phaedo was talking to. I don't remember the name, through whatever. But like,
Timaeus, I'm not sure. I mean, if you find definite textual evidence for that, I would like to see, because I don't remember seeing that this soul must be necessarily individualized.
well, but don't we have the whole thing about like people who are like fully caught up in like moral bad will like have this sort of afterlife and go through this river and like suffer in this way, and then people who like act virtuously but for the wrong reasons will sort of join like a, you know, social species of animals, and then people who are like philosophers will like, oh, get to hang out with the gods and eat, you know, eat chicken over rice with the gods and just hang out, or like whatever.
No, that's
Isn't
right.
that kind of an individualized concept of the soul?
Yeah, maybe you're right. I mean, because that sounds so outrageous to me, maybe I'm like unconsciously resisting that. I mean, I know this is not a very rigorous answer, but I mean, it's not even an answer. I think maybe Plato is, or Socrates or Plato is telling that story for those who are already here. He is not telling that story to individualized soul after they are dead. So that again is a kind of conceptualization of the afterworld, not because it is true, but that conceptualization makes you lead a certain life in this world. So I always read it as not a metaphysical theory, but as an allegory of how we should live our lives here. But of course, I mean, yours is more literal and more textually sort of obvious. Mine is a little bit forcing it because, you know, we necessarily think that these are individualized soul. But if I read it with Hadot and resist this idea that Plato has this crazy metaphysical theory, I read it as an allegory of how we should live on Earth. That's the best I can do. So I don't know. That's a great question. So it is a question, of course. Yeah. Isaac, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I was kind of going to say something similar to what you just said. And I think there's definitely evidence for that. Like, we have this figure that's only questioning everything. And then all of a sudden he goes on this giant spiel about, like, now I know everything.
I always suspect that that's a kind of sign at the beginning, like he's writing poetry. So that's for Socrates' way of saying, like, he's making things up. That's how I read it. Like, he's just like telling a story, and this might be one of his poetic moments in which you are just like giving an well, maybe it's not supposed to be taken literally, but again, this is a sort of textual analysis, so I don't know. Yeah, don't talk to each other while during class. I know that you are privately sending letters to each other by mistake. So, which is cool. I don't care. Yes, Blessed. Sorry, you were cut off. Yeah.
Yeah, I just had a question, and I was thinking about this when I was reading. Like, does the motivation behind the pursuits of like wisdom, or like as in like for the sake of like the love of wisdom, matter, or like is it like if someone was like, okay, I'm going to practice philosophy solely for the preservation of the soul, because that they believe that they're still individual, like the soul is still individualized. Do they then like yeah, today is it like important? Like, or do they then like not fulfill their like proper like true virtue or like yeah, that kind of thing?
No, I don't. That again, I mean, you are asking me, I don't know. I mean, I can't answer that question. I always go back to this idea like philosophy as a reward in itself. It's not like your soul is going to be so one. I mean, if you are going to study philosophy because you think that your soul is going to go to like this wonderful place and you are going to be awesome, I I couldn't promise that. That would be like false advertisement. So I think it's a practice in itself that counts in terms of regardless of what happens. Even like, is that even a meaningless question to ask? Like, what happens after nothing happens for you anymore, after you're dead? I don't know. I mean, this might lead exactly the opposite, which it did, of course. Like, you should never do philosophy in life, never question anything, live your life as thoughtlessly and pleasurably and blah blah as possible, get everything you want, have this absolute bundle of desires, and then destroy yourself. That could also be the, because it's, if it is like a wager, later on Christians kind of formulate it in terms of wager. I love this kind of you might have heard this. I don't know whether you do this to yourself, and when you watch outrageous videos on YouTube about controversial issues, when somebody says, you might not believe in God. What if you are wrong? What if you are wrong and there's a God and you are going to burn for eternity? That's a pretty bad bet. Like, like if I'm wrong and if I'm going to burn for the rest of eternity, like, am I going to feel that like on my body, that burn? Because that feeling of pain is really more metaphoric than physical, I suppose, but it's a wager. Like, so if you think like, so I'll say to you, like, why don't you practice philosophy? Like, what will you lose? Isn't it a better bet than like suffering for the rest of your existence of your soul than just do a little bit here? I think that's not really a very convincing argument either way. Yes, Nancy.
I feel like the problem with how philosophy is trying to distance the soul from the body, it's like that feels all very well if you just think of bodily desires, but that also seems to mean that it separates us off from other people. And it seems like the thing you said at the beginning about, or a while ago, about Euthyphro, how he was trying to be just but ended up being unjust by condemning his father. It seems like when Socrates basically decides to let himself be killed, that also, I know this isn't practicing ignorance, but to me that seems unjust because he's not considering his family. And it feels like a weird mix of like, maybe he's saying built this whole thing up to comfort the other people he's talking to, but he also is completely dismissing his family in his decision.
Complains that she's crying and sends her away, etc.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I like to think, yeah, of course it's wrong to dismiss your family. You should not do that. But is it because you hate your body or you separate yourself from your body that you dismiss your family? Does the soul actually bring us together in a way that our bodies separate us? I don't know. I mean, that's a good question. I suspect, I read it like sometimes people say, oh, I just live for my family. It's like, okay, so after a certain age, I can say that I can do maybe more harm to my family by living than dying. So that's a fact. So this is how I imagine my life in terms of my family. Like, I don't want my kids to be worried about me when I'm 90 and cannot walk and like, they have all this anxiety and fear and all that crap. So it's like, maybe it is more adequate to just sort of say, okay, it's time for me to take off. I know you'll cry. I hope you'll cry, but I never want to be in a stage where you are not even going to cry when I die, and you are going to say, oh, good. Well, it was about time. So, and then they'll say, oh, he was suffering. Good for him. He saved himself. It's like, whatever. So I don't know. I mean, that plays very differently in different circumstances. So I don't know. But you're right. Socrates seems to be a little bit cavalier about his relationship to his family. I mean, it's a, you know, you need to also live and die gracefully. So, yes, Rand.
Okay, so yeah, I just have another quick question. Yeah, let's go for it. So with Plato being a follower of Socrates, follower of Aristotle, I think that's how it goes. Follower of,
It's Socrates, Plato, Aristotle.
okay, Socrates, Aristotle, Plato.
No,
or yeah. Okay, but yeah. With him recounting with Plato recounting, being there with him in the last final minutes of his, final days of his death. So does he put like a more sympathetic approach to it, or is he telling it verbatim? Let's go with that.
Well, we already touched upon that. Like, he said that he was not there. So even if he may be doing verbatim, which I suspect, he doesn't want you to read it that way, because he said, I wasn't there. I mean, in the dialogue, he says, I wasn't there, right? Yes, Olivia.
Which you suspect, or which you suspect is not true?
What?
That you said, even if he's doing it verbatim, which I suspect.
Which I suspect that he's not doing.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to,
I mean,
you seem bothered by the lack of corrections here.
oh no, that's perfectly fine. I appreciate it. Like, I suspect that he is not reporting verbatim, but I'm more certain that he doesn't want us to take it verbatim, because he says, I wasn't even there, which might be actually more of a reverse way of saying that, you can only say that you were not there if you are actually there, and whatever. So that sounds very complicated. So I don't take it. He's trying to make Socrates, the man, the person, a sort of mythological philosopher, the figure of Socrates. I mean, this is in What is Philosophy section, the chapter that Olivia was just talking about on 3, that the figure of Socrates had a decisive influence on the definition of the word philosopher. Socrates has often been compared to Jesus Christ. Among analogies, it's true that both had an immense historical influence, and so mythical figure of Socrates as presented by the first generation of his disciples. So he was almost sort of idealized as a figure. So since he himself didn't write anything, we don't even know what kind of a person he is now. And I go with Nancy a little bit, maybe like, who talks like that before they're about to die? Like, that's an idealized sort of like, let's talk about philosophy. Like, I would probably be like, I don't know what I would be doing. Like, they're asking me to kill me, like, just kill me. Like, for now I have to wait for the ship to come, like all that. I mean, I don't know. So no, I don't take it to be a verbatim account of what happened. And it really doesn't matter anyway. I mean, even if it is or it isn't, its impact for us, our understanding, the understanding of Christianity, is much more important than what actually happened. Facts almost never really matter, honestly. I mean, come on, you live in 2021, so I mean.
Could we say there's no sympathy from Plato in any of it toward Socrates, or anything that he's mentioned? Yeah, let's go.
Incredible sympathy. He loves him. I mean, I can tell that. Like, he absolutely loves Socrates, and that's why I make him into kind of a mythical character. If anything, he exaggerates how virtuous, wonderful, ignorant philosopher Socrates was. And it might so happen that philosophy was born out of this idealization, at least in the figure of Socrates, more than anything else. Maybe Socrates was just like I mean, maybe not like Trump, but maybe he was just like a figure, like, who would be, I don't know who would be Socrates today, but someone like hanging around. So, and Plato sort of built this image incredibly. And he probably loved the person too, as a person. And even if he didn't love him with this sort of emotional thing, which he might have, but also like it was wrong for him to be killed. He did believe that it was wrong. I mean, you're sure. I mean, I don't know. Like he didn't want that to happen. So yes, he has a lot of sympathy for Socrates. Yes, Blessed.
I just wanted to go back to something that you said earlier, when we're talking about like the concept of individualizing the soul and how like it's not, well, you said it's not what you think Socrates is saying, but then like if we don't individualize the soul, then like what is then our motivating factor to practice ignorance? Because then if we don't like individualize the soul, there's no like consequence for not doing that. And then like, so is it that we owe it to ourselves to then just practice ignorance? Like, or is it just like, yeah, a choice? Like you can live your life as you want it on earth and like give in to every single bodily desire and passion and everything that you want. And then then let the soul suffer on its own. And like, it has nothing to do with you since it's not like individualized. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I mean, maybe this is something that Nancy was asking a couple of sessions ago about good in itself and good for the sake of something else. And if it is a good life for the sake of a reward at the end, then it's different than the activity of engaging in this for the sake of itself. Now, Plato is trying to convince us, and might have convinced some of us, that this as an activity in and of itself is good, period. Regardless of whether you have an individualized soul, which will be rewarded as coming back as something else, etc., that might motivate you to live in a certain way, but it doesn't really matter whether it is good for the sake of something else, but it is good in itself. And part of it is maybe it's a kind of paradoxical thing. It's like when you are giving in all of your passions, desires, inclinations, etc., you are, ironically, you are being just like everybody else. That's in a way that philosophy, in an interesting way, is the only individualizing activity. That's the only activity that separates your soul from others. Now, that's a complicated question because in philosophy, there is this really important aspect of friendship, which I go back to what Nancy said, whether this isolates you. It isolates you in such a way that, yes, philosopher might not be like a popular person who is loved by his family, her family, or their family, or other random people who don't know them, etc. But there's a certain of philosophical friendship, which is a philia. Philia also means among love, or also means friendship. So that genuinely establishes relationships. Like what you consider to be a genuine, deep, significant relationship with a person, not just always polite, good, happy, etc., but a deep relationship that touches your soul in such a way that you don't have with other people. And I think Socrates also is that, like he doesn't seem to have that, at least from Plato, other than Plato himself, like that kind of deep connection to the other person, to the other people. And that makes your soul more unique and your relationship to the others more unique and profound. So maybe that's way of an answer for Socrates. So like almost like you satisfy your desire best when you don't satisfy them. And also like you should, that depends on the person, I suppose. Like, if you are longing for that, that might be already something. Like, a lot of people say like, I want to make a lot of money, buy wonderful things and eat amazing food. That's what I'm going to be happy. And if that is the case, and if they are convinced of that, what can you do? It's like, sure, go ahead, whatever, like exploit people, do that, take advantage of the injustices in the world, and do that, all of those things. But the reality is that when you satisfy your desires and live for the sake of that, maybe you are being a little bit hurtful to other people, including your family. So I don't know. I mean, I hate to sound preachy like this at some point. So.
I just don't know how to write my essay now, because I was going to be all literal. I was going to take everything in the text face value and just be like, yeah, and Socrates thinks you get thrown in a river. And now I don't get to say that because it's all deep philosophical reflection, metaphor.
Oh, you are being sarcastic. Okay. You got me there for a second. Like the way you started with that seriousness, I was totally like fell for that. I think like one of the ways in which this plays itself out is, so like, since this is ancient Greek philosophy, we are trying to, ever since we started the course, I hope you are aware of the fact that the mainly more important question is like, the philosophers trying to answer what philosophy itself is, and whether like we kept like trying to define it and explain it, what kind of a way of life, etc. One of the ways to think about this dialogue is that philosophy happens. Like it is not like a set of established truths, ideas, etc. There are moments in which it happens. Now, how can you distinguish those moments? You somehow do it intuitively, maybe at moments that you are more collapsed into yourself. So Socrates gives this like, oh, it's the separation of the body of soul. It's like that. What does that even mean? Like in terms of my actual practice, like, isn't it ironic that when I experience that I feel the most alive? Like it's a preparation for death, but I'm most alive. So we always have this biological conception of life as linear, and then at some point you're dead, which is really a very kind of scientific, evidentiary, but also problematic understanding of life and death. Because as many philosophers in the 20th century say, like the moment you are born, you start dying. It's a process too. It is not just something that happens, even like the separation of the body and the soul at the end of your life, like somebody will just like pull your soul out of your body or something. So that might not even be a good way of understanding our existence. That might not even be the best way to understand our existence, because one of the implications is that we always think that death is the future. As a possibility, it's in the future. And you obviously should think that. I started to think less of that, of course. But the reality is that the fact is that it's a possibility at any given point. Now, living with that, ironically, makes your life better. So people always say to me when I say, oh, you are such a pessimist, you are like depressing us, etc. No, I mean, that doesn't depress you. That should mean nothing in life should ever depress you, because it could be over just now. like anything that you are worrying about and putting your stress or causing stress could be over at any given moment. You know, somebody died on Zoom, like an Argentinian teacher. Do you know that? Yeah, like she was trying to teach with COVID and then collapsed and died on Zoom. It's very traumatic for the students. So that might happen. So you don't have to, maybe you don't have to write your final paper. So don't stress about it. So you can always think, oh, maybe Ferit will die by Friday next week.
Stay alive, Jack.
Thanks, Isaac. If I survive, all credit goes to you.
Yeah. So you don't seem to be concerned about me dying and you not writing the paper. So good. Yeah, don't write it. If I should leave a will and say like, if I die, everybody should get an A. So
I mean, are you planning on dying? Because I mean, we've got to schedule out how to write the paper. So should I even bother starting it? Do you think?
I mean, you have to make your own calculations. I don't have a plan, but
Okay.
I'm driving tomorrow a long way to Philadelphia, and it's supposed to rain. So play your odds. I don't know.
Okay. So what I hear is that if we don't hear from you by Monday, things have gone horribly wrong on the driving incident.
Well, my only fear is that I don't know. So like we get these emails on faculty listserv about somebody dying. So that's my like ultimate fear. I don't know why. Like I'm just gonna be an email at Earlham College listserv. Like so, I'm sure as long as I teach here, they will announce it for your own benefit. Like
Okay.
philosophy 155. He died. Don't write your paper.
So if you're seriously hospitalized,
Oh,
should we write the paper then? Like where do we draw the line here? Like
that's a very interesting question. I know we are sort of laughing about that, but again, you have to play your odds. Like, you know, like serious, meaning what? Like you need to get the status update, because let me put it this way, like my final act before dying will not be grading the papers. So that's for sure. You can be sure of that. I can guarantee that. But other than that, maybe I'll recover. I don't know. I'm sure Bonita will, I mean, I don't know whether Bonita does that now, but I'm sure they'll give you incomplete. Maybe Kevin will grade the papers, then you'll be in real trouble. I'm kind of recording this. This is like for posterity. Like, wouldn't it be ironic? Like, oh, he talked all about death and then he actually really died. Yeah.
I was doing some research on pass by catastrophe, and apparently if someone dies during an exam or the other students pass, the university burns down or is destroyed, or students get a bachelor, and the student who gets hit by a campus shuttle bus gets free tuition. The last one seemed kind of weird, but those are the rules apparently.
Okay, this sounds like some Reddit type of thing. Where did you get this?
Wikipedia.
Wikipedia? No, really? Hmm. Okay, yeah. I like this. This is a good practice. You should always think your life in terms of the possibility of that. Someone come hit me with a campus shuttle bus. Yeah.
I actually do know some of the people who are shuttle bus drivers, and it's honestly kind of just a matter of standing within 15 feet of the road.
I'll hit you. Oh. I once went to Chicago with a Earlham shuttle that a student was driving, So I survived that. So. Okay, any other questions about the paper? We can end early today if you don't have questions, because I don't really have anything to say other than to think about the notion of the soul in terms of the universal. I mean, part of the argument that he makes is to draw a parallel between the soul and the individual soul as a beautiful things and the beautiful. And I think that's an important comparison or analogy that you need to be aware of in your papers.
Wait, where does he draw that comparison?
So like, that's the part that you were reading. He says, there are beautiful things, don't you think? And there are, what page was that? I can find it.
Oh, like around the section about like equal things and then the capital E equal and stuff.
Yeah, what
Okay.
page was that? 101?
I want to say it was in like the,
No, not 101.
fuck, I don't know, I'm sorry.
113, there's a lot about that. We must then possess the knowledge of equal before that time when we first saw the equal objects.
Yeah. 115, you said?
113.
It starts on 113, but yes, 113, 115, yeah.
I actually have a question. You've been kind of, well, we've been talking about this a lot, like the idea that the soul as it's expressed in Phaedo kind of creates this commonality of man. And I'm wondering if you could explain that a little more. I think you've been kind of hinting at that throughout multiple classes.
Well, I think this is really the question of, that's why I said what I said last, it's a question of the universal, in the sense that the reason that we talk about it as a concept like the soul is our somewhat conviction that we are all alive according to the same principle. So, you know, even though I think it's my soul, inevitably, I think that my soul has something in common with yours. So they are of the same kind. They are part of the same concept. So in that sense, that's common as equality, beautiful, common. We were talking about that yesterday on Wednesday, when we say, like I say, this is beautiful, this is beautiful, this is beautiful. And I somehow hint that there is something common to all those beautiful things. That commonality is tricky because it's also a difference. So yes, this is beautiful, but it's not beautiful in the same way that the other thing is beautiful, but they are both beautiful. So we are actually saying something quite sophisticated when we say, when we use a concept. And we do that in many other things, even simple concepts like empirical concepts like books. I know they are all books because I call them by the same name, the book, but then I know they are different. So I know that I'm making already a connect identity and difference. It's a book, but it's not the same book. So this becomes really a significant question in the history of philosophy all the way to 19th century and 21st century. So how are we talking about concepts? So when I say the soul, there's already with the idea that since I'm going to die and you are not going to die, right? But you are also going to die at some point. So there's something common to our souls in a way that I don't believe that I'm just going to be immortal. And maybe an immortal person doesn't even know. So there is, you know, we say the soul, but I don't say something like, I have this thing soul, and nobody has it. It's like a very private possession that is, I don't even mean that, because even if you had something like that, you cannot express it in any other way than a universal. So if you read Hegel in your life in the future, you will sort of see that more explicitly. So therefore, soul is like a universal. Universal in the sense that it's not the same thing in everybody, but it is the identical thing. They are all called souls, but they are different. So this is really the philosophical moment to me always, like if you think about something that seems to be very obvious, very straightforward, everyday, common sense, etc. When you actually ask the right questions in the right way, they become completely mysterious. And then you say, how are we even doing this? Like, how can we even like have the commonsensical nature of language in which we are literally saying contradictory things? So one thing that Socrates doesn't explicitly say, but Plato says that philosophy, and Aristotle too, philosophy starts with wonder, wandering, with an O, wandering, like, wow, I never thought about it that way, but it really displaces what I consider to be common sense. I mean, I don't know whether, I mean, it certainly makes life more interesting than it is otherwise. So that's why I keep saying that that commonality, it's not like maybe a positive commonality, but this ability to share the kind of pretty uncanny nature of our existence. I mean, you are laughing, you know, when we are talking about that, etc., but it's a kind of uncomfortable laugh because you know, like it's also true. Any one of us could have that. I mean, be careful, don't make me sad, but still. That's a practice, that's an engagement. And that's when Socrates defines death, when he says something like, when we are touched by philosophy in the right way, by touched, somehow invaded and kind of overwhelmed, engage with philosophy in the right way, it looks like the exercise of death. Maybe that, even that awareness, in order, allows you to engage in a very bizarre way with life in the most serious possible way, but at the same time not to take it seriously at all. So you don't take anything in life too seriously while taking life way too seriously. So that I've never really understood, like, you know, I don't know whether I want to get into politics of it, etc. One of the things that sort of interesting to me in the United States is like, you probably, as a society, I didn't mean to say you, but you probably engage with the most profound things in the context of stand-up comedy or some kind of laughing about it, because that gives you that kind of laughter that it is not serious, but it's incredibly serious. So a lot of stand-up comedians can do that, but then you try to kind of legislate that too, which is like, how can you legislate laughing in a way that you don't take it too seriously, but that doesn't mean you don't take life seriously. You take life very seriously in not taking anything particular seriously. So there's something about the dismissiveness in laughter, which is uncomfortable. Like you laugh at it, but you don't quite dismiss it as unimportant. And you know, even if you think about the nature of fiction, that's like, you know, you engage in real emotions in a way that you cannot engage in everyday life with the sort of protection of the fiction. So that's why we love fiction, in the sense that it allows us to get angry, cry, scream, and the drama, and like have all these human emotions that you cannot have with respect to each other. Like you cannot like scream, and you know, I mean, that's much more difficult to like hiding behind the sort of protection of the fiction. And I think that's a really interesting phenomenon in which we can also approach philosophy too. So I'm not suggesting it's fiction, but it's always like whenever we think we are talking about something, we are not really talking about that. So my daughter say like, I've never seen you crying, and I only cry when I watch really silly tearjerker movies. So that, you know, that then you say, oh, it's just a movie. I mean, whatever. I let myself go. Yeah. Because crying and that's serious. I cannot do that.
Wait, for you mean you can't cry?
I can cry. I mean, they have never seen me. That's different than saying not crying. But yeah, it's hard. It's harder than like watching, I don't know, what sappy movies. What's your go-to sappy movie? Like you know your life sucks, you want to cry, but you cannot really cry because it is too real. So you watch a movie that allows you to cry, but you are really crying to yourself.
Marley,
What?
Marley and Me.
Molly and Me. Okay, I'm not
Yeah,
thinking.
the dog dies, so that's the main
Legally
thing.
Blonde? Really? You are joking. I don't believe you, Rand. Any suggestions? Like maybe I'll spend the weekend watching sappy movies to cry about the fact that I'm sad the class is over. But I'll cry at something else. Paddleton. Okay. Yeah, I should save this chat. So Paddleton. I mean, I don't take Legally Blonde seriously. So sorry. Anything else? Like movie suggestions. I mean, I used to tell my go-to movie. I don't tell anymore because it is too old and it's also very embarrassing now. So Dr. Strangelove? No. Shutter Island. Okay. We belong to a complete Marriage Story. Oh, really? That made you cry? I watched that. Wasn't that on Netflix or something?
Yeah, I thought it was really good.
Scarlett Johansson? Yeah, okay. I don't know whether I cried in that. I mean, crying, of course, like crying, but like choking up. Marriage Story, Shutter Island. I don't know how much I trust you. I don't know in what stage of our communication we are, but maybe I'll tell you. It's an old movie. You probably don't know. It's an old movie. It's like maybe 90s. For some reason, I cannot explain why. it might have some psychoanalytic reason about my mom, etc. But this movie called Stepmom, have you heard of that? Good. Casablanca, wow, Cameron, like you are, that's a sophisticated cry. Stepmom is like totally like this stupid movie in which they get a divorce, they have a stepmom, but then their mother dies, and it's just like too much. But it always got to me. So. Has anyone seen Stepmom? Good, you don't know how dorky I am, so that's good. Don't watch it. Okay, any other issues? We can end early today. You can go get your test. Peanut Butter Falcon, are you serious? Is that a movie? See, I would have never watched a movie called Peanut Butter Falcon. I wouldn't even
It
look.
has Shia LaBeouf in it. It's pretty good.
Okay. I'll use these against you in the future during your career at Earlham. I mean, it's on record now, like Rance, if I ever see you again, yes, yeah, he suggested Legally Blonde. One or two, there's another one. Okay. Yeah. Yes,
Is
Jared.
there anything such as fiction if it's like the emotions that we get out of it are real and the emotions that went into it are real?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, that more interesting question is how much of our lives do we live as fiction too? Like fictionalize our relationship with others, tell stories, like, you know, when you tell your story to someone else about something that didn't really happen, but you interpret it that way. And like, you know, like you'll probably have some connection with your high schools, etc. Like maybe 5-10 years from now, when you remember and talk about things that happened beyond the obvious, when you go actually to the interpretation, you'll see how everybody fictionalized their lives completely differently. So yeah, that's a legitimate question of how actually the concept of fiction seems to be pretty obvious in our minds to separate from reality, but how much does that really relate to our experience and true to our experience? When do you really know which one is fiction? That's a good question. And the emotions are probably more real. And Rousseau says that in 17th, 18th century, like, you know, we need the fiction to express and live real emotions. Okay. Monday at 9, you probably won't have a very long protocol, but still, I think you need to put all of this together. So we'll meet Monday at 9. And as I said, it's again a question. If you have any questions, any issues about your papers, please don't ask too many questions after Monday about the papers, because I have to answer them individually. So please spend some time on at least organizing your paper so that you'll have. Yes, Charlie.
Rewrites, are they due today or the 23rd, you said?
Monday.
Monday? Okay.
Okay. Have a nice weekend. Stay healthy. If you are traveling, be careful. And I'll see you Monday.